Dear Elin, many thanks for accepting my interview request and for coming here to my living room. You are an outstanding artist working in various fields such as, and just to mention a few, like photography, you're a drawer, you paint, um, and you are making site-specific installations, public projects and performances with themes like the global economy, contemporary workers or dream workers, and how the media presents or mispresents the world, and so on. And you are also teaching, which is an extra gift for all of us, I think, especially the students, of course, but in the long term for all of us. Please tell me how and when you realized that you will become an artist, especially a professional artist.
Yeah, I don't know if you really ever realize that you're going to be a professional artist. I think you just become an artist. And, you know, I do believe Joseph Beuys, the great German artist who thought everybody could be an artist, or everyone is an artist, or has the potential to be an artist. I do think I was either going to be an artist or a lawyer, and I almost went to college to be a lawyer. I was the president of the debate team in my high school, and I almost went to college for law. But I chose to go to Sarah Lawrence, which is a very artistic school, and I actually was studying poetry, and I wrote a lot of poetry. I still write poetry, and I decided to go to art school, to transfer to an art school. And I remember my poetry professor, Tom Lux, saying, "We need you as a poet, don't leave us." But I felt like I had to go do visual art. So that was probably, I was 18, 19, I think, when I decided to really go to be a visual artist. And I do struggle a little bit with the word professional. I mean, I have to teach classes called professional practice, and I don't really like that word because it seems to separate, teachers or artists who have shows from regular people or something. But I mean, to me, professional means you do what you say you'll do. You're responsible. But, I'm not a commercial artist, so.
Okay, well, can you please tell me what you learned during your studies? You studied at least at two universities to have your bachelor and your master. What you learned there the most, what you maybe still use today, what is still really important for you today maybe, and if it is like that, did you also had some special mentors in that period that also gave you something very special and valuable? Please tell me about them, who they were, and what they gave to you.
Yeah, I think where I went to school was really important to me. I went to Sarah Lawrence College, which is a school that is, I don't want to say it's experimental, but you don't get grades. You get written reports from your professors. You only take 3 classes, and you take a class and then you work on a project with the professor. So it's like an in-depth study. And it's really, you can kind of design your own curriculum, so it's very independent. People go there who are really independent. And it's very known for dance and poetry. And so I went there, and then I went to an art school for a year, and then I went back to Sarah Lawrence. And then I also went to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago for my master's, and that's a very good school for photography, especially sort of experimental photography. So I think just even the institutions I went to really helped shape me as a teacher. I really don't care about grades. I have to give grades at the university I teach at, but I tell them, that the learning is the most important thing. But yes, I had many teachers that really were special to me, but I will talk about 2 of them briefly. One of them is Joel Sternfeld, who is one of the most well-respected, famous American photographers. His most famous book is called American Prospects, and he got a Guggenheim to do it. It's sort of in the style of Robert Frank in a way, but he uses an 8x10 camera, so it's large film, and I actually ended up assisting him on one of his books later. But he was my professor at Sarah Lawrence when I went back to Sarah Lawrence after art school. And I'll never forget the first day we had critique, and I put up my pictures, and he crawled under the table in the classroom and hit his head against the table because he just couldn't believe my work. And it sounds like I'm bragging, but to have that reaction from such an amazing photographer. I mean, he just supported me and really believed in me as an artist. And he could sit there and I make a lot of work, so I would come in with 100 pictures and he would sit there with me in his office and he would make a yes pile, a no pile, and a maybe pile, and he would just go through. And he was right, like you could just see, he just sees it. So I actually just brought him down to the University of North Carolina where I teach to lecture, and he was incredible. I'm still friends with him. I went across country with him after college to help him on a project. And he was just a very serious, dedicated photographer who really was political in his work and believed in doing work that you find important. And then my most important teacher in graduate school was Carol Mavor, and she wrote the essay in my first book, Bomb After Bomb. And she is an art historian who really introduced me to like feminist theory and psychoanalytic theory. So we read Freud and we read Lacan and we read the French feminists, and she really had us write a lot, and she just really expanded my thinking. I think Joel really helped me become a photographer, but she really helped me become like a conceptual artist, like somebody who really made work from the thought, and to be a really critical thinker.
And it's still very useful for you today.
Oh yes, I mean, that's the way I work mostly. I start with the idea, and I still love to read, and I teach a lot of the same writers or ideas that she taught me when I was in graduate school. But then I also teach the way Joel taught, which is to give them freedom and to just be excited about their work and encourage them, So they both were really different teachers, but equally influential.
Yeah. Well, one main theme of your work is the input of the nuclear attack on Hiroshima. Mm-hmm. You published 2 books. The first one is Bomb After Bomb. It's a violent cartography from 2007. And the second one is called After Hiroshima from 2013. Mm-hmm. Please describe these 2 books, if you can, of course, and how you got there and how you worked in general with these 2 books to produce them, to make them, and to put the essence inside there. And why is Hiroshima that important for you and all of us?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll start with the first book. So Bomb After Bomb, A Violent Cartography, became a book because I started a series of drawings of places the United States has bombed. And I talked about it today at my lecture at the Minerva Academy, that I was working with an anthropologist who was writing a book about Fayetteville, North Carolina, which is the town where the largest military base is located, Fort Bragg. And I was making black and white documentary photographs for her book. And when we were there, President Clinton at the time, decided to bomb Iraq again after the first Gulf War under Bush. And it just struck me that here I was with the soldiers who were going to fly and drop bombs on other people. And I really wanted to make the connection between the local, where I was living, and what's happening in the world. And I did a drawing of the bombing of Baghdad. It was the first drawing I did in the series. And I just started doing more and more of these drawings, and then a museum wanted me to make 10 for a show, and so I made 10, and then I ended up making 60. And I did a lot of research, and I realized I knew a lot about the places we had bombed, but I didn't know about other things. Like I didn't know we did 3 big nuclear underground tests in Alaska, or how many nuclear tests we did in the southwest desert of the United States. We were bombing ourselves. And I knew that in some way, but I didn't really understand it. So I educated myself, and I felt like that was the perfect form. I'm not a painter. I have my degree in photography, but to actually work really long and hard with my hand on something that most people don't want to think about makes people come to the work and makes people slow down and look at the work. So I did them, and then I wanted to do a book about it more. I really wanted to edit a book with lots of writers writing about bombing and war, but Carta, the press that it's on, they said, well, we want to do a book of your drawings and pick one person. So Howard Zinn wrote the essay, and Howard Zinn is he has died, but he is a famous American historian, sort of a radical historian. He was a bombardier in World War II, And after the war, he realized what he had done, and he became a peace activist and a historian. He wrote The People's History of the United States. So, and in that book, there's an essay by Carol Mavor, one of my most influential teachers, and in that essay, she focuses on Hiroshima. But I was already aware of Hiroshima because I grew up in an activist family, and my parents took me to the town square on August 6th as a child to remember Hiroshima. Sometimes there were other people, but usually it was just us. And we would read accounts of the bombing, and I remember seeing Hiroshima Mon Amour in high school, and just knowing about it as a part of history, but really being moved by it. And so it was always in my consciousness, and then Carol's essay focused on it, and then I'm married to an epidemiologist, and he studies the effects of radiation on nuclear workers all over the world, and so his research brought us to Hiroshima. And I planned to do work there, for sure, but I never planned to do as much work there, and I didn't even know if I'd ever go back. But I made work there and then showed that work back there a couple years later and was invited to give talks, and then I got a fellowship, and I just sort of became obsessed with it. I mean, being there, I was just very inspired, as well as being very disturbed, but turning that disturbance or turning that anger or over profound sadness over what my country did into something through art, that to transform that experience. I don't think a lot of people want to think about Hiroshima, and they've seen lots of pictures or documentaries, but to make work that doesn't look like that, to get people to think about it in a different way. And so I did a lot of work, and Daylight Books approached me to do a book because the guys who started that press, Michael Itkoff and Taj Foer, they also went to Sarah Lawrence College. They also studied with Joel Sternfeld, and Taj was actually one of my graduate students. And so they asked me to do the book, and I was really happy to do the book. And Jim Elkins was one of my professors at the Art Institute of Chicago too. And he's a really brilliant writer and cultural theorist, and he wrote an essay for the book that is really complicated about time and exposure and history and photography. And I learned a lot from his essay. I learned a lot about my work through his essay. So that's how the books came into being, and books are wonderful because they're permanent. I mean, they're objects, so you can look at the book even though you might not see my show. So I really like the book as a form in and of itself for the work. It seems, I don't want to say more democratic, but only the people here can see the show that's here, so. Yeah.
Well, you lived 3 months long in Hiroshima. Mm-hmm. Can you please describe for me your memories from that period?
Yeah, so it was the summer of 2008, and my children were really small. They were like 3 and 5. And I remember when we flew into Japan for the first time into Hiroshima, and it was so green around it, and I couldn't believe it because somehow you think it's going to be still gone, but it was a thriving city, and it was really beautiful, and everybody was incredibly nice, but it was also hard because for me, being there as an American, everything was about the A-bomb, but people live there and they're born there and they go about their life, so they're not always thinking about the atomic bomb, but it is everywhere in that city. The sidewalks have raised patterns because a lot of people have cataracts or they're blind because of the A-bomb. There's monuments everywhere, there's historical plaques all over. 60 trees survived the A-bomb and they're all marked, and there's maps, and there's the Peace Park, so it's very present. And the first time I went to the Peace Museum, the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum, they have these documentaries on the first floor that you can watch that are really powerful, and I didn't even go into the museum. I just watched those films and I went home because I'm already like sobbing, and it took me many visits to get through the whole museum. And then I started working in the archive, taking the A-bombed artifacts and placing them on sun-sensitive paper and making the cyanotypes. It's a very intense city, and I think I cried every day at some point, but it was also really beautiful and really alive. And it's a city it's a self-designated city of peace. They say they are a city of peace, and their museum is the Peace Museum. Nagasaki's is the Atomic Bomb Museum. So there's a difference between the two. And it's full of activists who work against war and against nuclear weapons and nuclear power, and it's just a very powerful place. I feel really inspired when I'm there and really engaged with what I'm interested in, and there's people there who are interested in that. You know, a lot of Americans come there and they visit, but they don't stay and they don't come back, and so I've built up a relationship with a lot of the people there, and so it's a very beautiful place. And it was intense to be there with my kids, because my kids would run up to the A-bomb trees and hug them and tell them they were sorry for the bomb. You know, it's just like incredible, and it made me realize my parents taught me about Hiroshima, and now I'm doing this for my children, and you know, it's a pretty powerful thing.
Yeah. Can you maybe tell me a little bit how your daily life looked there? What kind of structure did you had there, and did it really also shape you? Did it just give you something specific back, like a special gift maybe, to be there?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I mean, I felt like it was a gift that I could be there. I mean, I would love to live there. I think it's a beautiful place. You know, no one has guns. You know, it's safe. But we lived in the dormitory that, you know, so the U.S. government built the atomic bomb casualty commission building, ABCC, in 1945 after the bombing to study the victims of the war. They did not help them. They didn't treat them. They didn't give them anything. And now it's called the Radiation Effects Research Foundation, the RARF, and it's a joint organization with the Japanese government since the 70s. So that's where my husband went to work. And above the complex, there's a dorm. And after the war, there were probably, you know, 150 scientists and doctors living there. But, you know, we were there probably with 4 other people. So it was a little bit spooky, you know, a little bit like The Shining in a way. But it was built by the Americans. So, you know, we had a big apartment. Like for Japan, it was a huge place. It was very strange to be living in this old military dorm. I felt like a spy or like an imposter, you know, and it's on this beautiful hill, this beautiful mountain overlooking the city, and the Japanese really don't like this place, you know, because they know the Americans didn't help anybody. They just studied them and photographed them. And it's very secretive. It's a very problematic place, but we stayed there and it was very comfortable, and we had a taxi come up every morning and take me and the kids down the hill, and I dropped the kids off at the International YMCA where they went to school every day and had incredible Japanese food, and everything was in Japanese, and I went and did my work. So I would go to the museum and make these sun prints, or I would go and do rubbings, or I would just go do research and visit all the monuments or meet people or have tours with people who would teach me about what happened. And I stayed at the World Friendship Center on return visits. That is a more activist place. And then I would go to the kids' school at the end of the day and take the taxi back up the hill, and my husband would work all day at that center, and then we would, you know, eat and go to sleep. The kids were really young. So I didn't really go out at night, and it was very, you know, it was like that pretty much every day.
Okay.
And then I went back several times by myself, and those were really different sort of experiences, to just be me as an artist, you know, making work all the time and being able to do a lot more and meet more people. So, I mean, I don't know what it gave me. I mean, you know, traveling always gives you something. And I traveled a lot as a kid, so I mean, I just think having like, I am American, but I wish I wasn't. You know, I wish we didn't have nationalities. You know, I just kind of feel like be a citizen of the world, sort of. Yeah. I love Japanese food. I love the design. I love the people. I love the landscape. It's just an incredible place, so I feel so like filled with that.
What is the biggest difference for you to realize the difference between living or being a United States citizen and then living for some months in Hiroshima, and to have this contact with a complete different culture?
Yeah.
How did it touch you?
Well, I mean, there's many things. I could talk about so many things, but one thing I think there's right away is that I just feel safe there. Like, I don't walk out at night, even in my hometown, you know, as a woman alone. I feel like I could get raped, I could get shot, I could get mugged, I could, you just feel that way. When I land back in the United States, I feel like somebody could start shooting. And in Japan, if you fall down, 10 people stop and help you up. It's just a collectivist society, like fundamentally, it's collectivist. And you could say it's nationalist, but it doesn't feel that way. It feels more like a community, and in the States, it's very individualist. So that's just a fundamental difference that I really do feel. And maybe I feel it more as a woman, and I don't know if Japanese women feel as safe as I do. I think as a foreigner, it's really different for a woman. I'm a professor, and so they treat me with respect in a way that, at Hiroshima City University, where I was a visiting scholar, there were no women professors. There were 2 women professors, and they were fired when I was there, so it's all men. But there I am, as an American, as a visiting scholar, and I think it's because I'm American. So there's a sense of privilege that I always feel, it makes me really uncomfortable, but it also gave me a lot. It opened a lot of doors. And then the other thing is, I thought about this a lot, if Japanese people came to Washington, D.C. and wanted to go into the Smithsonian archive and use it, they would never be able. I just think the Smithsonian, you'd have to spend years doing paperwork and getting permission and meeting people. I just went there, and I just met somebody who helped me do it, and they're so much more open. They want people to tell the story, and they want people to remember Hiroshima. So it was so possible for me to do things that I can't imagine it happening in the other direction at all, let alone easily. So that was pretty profound.
Okay. Thank you very much for being that open.
Yeah.
Well, there's a quote, a Buto quote, I found, I think, on your website or somewhere related to you. It's saying, seeing things without focusing. Can you please give me your opinion about this?
It's interesting because I don't remember this quote. And so maybe it is on my website somewhere, maybe somebody said it, I don't know. It's an interesting quote. And I do think, when I think about it in this context, and with my show up here, I do think like a lot of the sun prints are not really focused. They're almost like ghosts, they're shadows of the objects. But yet, I am seeing those objects when I'm making them. You're seeing the results of that process. But I'm not focusing them. I don't have a camera making that work. I'm seeing them. So I don't know. It seems very related literally in terms of my work. But I don't think that's what Buto was talking about. I don't know what they were talking about, what that quote is referring to. But I do think we see things without focusing. I can see the things over here without focusing on them. And so maybe it really is about being aware sensorially of everything, like feeling the energy in the room and knowing that there's other people and just being empathetic and, having a wider view, I would think.
I think that sounds beautiful.
Oh,
Thank
good.
you. That's
Yes.
a good answer. Yes.
You're welcome.
Well, today we meet here in my living room here in Groningen, in the Netherlands, and today is September 11, 2019, which is a really special moment, I think. Please tell me how you remember 9/11 and what impact this had on you, and what you think about what impact it had on all of us.
Well, I think there's always been war, but I do think it was the start of this eternal war on terrorism. It was the start of all of this horrible stuff going on. But I remember it happening. I was, at home, and I had to go to school to teach. And I remember this was still when there were televisions. And I remember somebody had just given me a television. So I turned it on in my studio at school, and people were coming to watch it in my studio because it was the only TV on. And I remember there was an American, he was a graduate student, he was a veteran, a U.S. military veteran, and he was like, let's bomb them. And I was like, who should we bomb? We don't know who did this, And he was just ready to bomb anybody. And I was thinking seeing the footage of the buildings burning and the people jumping and falling, and I really was thinking that this is what happens all over the world all the time because of my country's bombs. You know, and it was such a big deal because it was America. And it is a big deal. It's terrible. I'm so sorry for everybody who died, and it was a terrible thing. I don't support anybody doing that, but I can understand if you're from a country where your families have been murdered and your cities have been destroyed, and that you might want revenge, or this is the cycle of war, you know? And we organized the first teach-in in the country after that, to teach people about our foreign policy and why maybe this happened. Not to say we deserved it or that the United States deserved this, but to explain it. And there were 1,000 people at the teach-in. I was one of the organizers. I was also the person who moderated the whole night. And in fact, the keynote speaker was William Bloom, and he was the biggest influence on my bomb book because he wrote a book about all the military interventions by the United States since World War II. So his book was a big resource for me. And he gave the keynote address, and in the keynote address, he said if he was president of the United States, he could end war because he would set up a Department of Peace, he would close the Department of Defense, he would apologize to everyone in the world, all the widows, all the orphans. I mean, he was incredible. But his speech, people went crazy, and I got death threats, and people called that the university should fire me, I should be tried for treason. It was a scary time. And then we did bomb. We did end up bombing. And I was always an activist. I still am an activist, but I became a little bit, I don't want to say paranoid, I just became very scared of being an activist and being who I was after that. To get death threats is now, you know, it's a pretty upsetting thing. And Dick Cheney, you know, who was the vice president, his wife Lynn Cheney, she set up an anti-American list, and I was number 2 on the anti-American list, which is crazy. You know, I'm a university professor, artist who organized a teach-in, and I'm number 2 on the anti-American list. You know, it's pretty crazy. So all of that is wrapped up into 9/11 for me, and I do think it, you know, our government lied about a lot of things that happened, and if you watch the Michael Moore film, you know, it does kind of appear that maybe Bush knew about it. I mean, I don't know, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I don't know. I don't, yeah, and it was a horrible thing, but I think we've done that 1,000,000 times over, all over the world, to the same sort of innocent people that died in those towers. So it's intense to be here. I gave my lecture today too, and I knew it was September 11th, and it feels intense, but it also seems somewhat appropriate to be here talking about Hiroshima on this day, because that was a town, a city that we dropped an atomic bomb on and killed 100,000 people like that. So it seems sort of perfect in a horrible way.
Yeah. Well, here in Groningen, you present your work after Hiroshima in a gallery called Block C. Well, it's called Galerie Block C. Mm-hmm. And I would like you to tell me how you got invited here to Groningen, and what your exhibition shows. What is it about? Mm-hmm. And which activities you had so far, and how you see Groningen with your tourist photographic eyes.
Yeah, well, it's beautiful. I love it. I think I might apply for a Fulbright just to come back. I love it here. But it all started because Ruby DeVos, who's getting her PhD at the University of Groningen, wrote about my work, a piece that's in the show. And it's a piece, it's the only piece like it. It's I put a fragment of an A-bombed object on X-ray film to see if the lingering radiation would expose the X-ray film, and it did. I did 10, the other 9, nothing happened, but this one has registration. So then I contact printed the X-ray film. So it's a photograph from the X-ray. And she wrote about that, and I loved what she wrote. She wrote it for a blog called Sublime Imperfections. It's a blog out of Amsterdam. And I wrote to her and I said, I really love this. I mean, we were in touch a little bit about it. And I said, I really love this, I'd love to bring my work. And then she ended up making a connection with Galerie Block C. They were interested. Marinus and Agnes run it, and Marinus spent a year in jail because he refused to do his military service here. So they are also, you know, political activists, anti-war people, so they were interested. And then she started planning this whole week of events called After Hiroshima. which is the title of my book, and it sort of circles around my show, but there's been lots of events. There was a screening of Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove. There was a screening of Richard Dawkins' The War Game that he made in 1965 about a nuclear bomb on England that was censored. They didn't screen it in the UK until the 80s. We did a day-long workshop about the archive, and people came from England and Italy and Greece, and it was incredible. There were 15 people. That was yesterday all day. We all did readings beforehand. We discussed the readings. We did a workshop on making an archive. There's lectures tomorrow night. There's projects in 3 bookstores. There's this installation in the basement of Art is Bookshop that's really incredible, of all these anti-nuclear posters, which I found out are Marinus's posters, the guy who runs Galerie Block C. So it's really been an intense week here. And I gave my lecture today, and tomorrow night there's lectures, performance at a bookshop. So it's been really, really powerful. And things like this give me hope that this is happening in Groningen, Netherlands in 2019, focused on Hiroshima. And 2 years ago there was something like this in Italy. I had a show in Italy and there was a whole discussion about Hiroshima. So when things like this happen, it does make you realize you're not alone, and that you have other people who are interested in what you're interested in and working together across disciplines and cultures. So it's been pretty intense. And I think this is a beautiful city and it's a beautiful country, and yeah, I love it.
Well, being a photographer, you work as a visual explorer. And you focus somehow on the manifestations of the relationship between the individual and the world. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I think that we're all individuals and we can choose to do with our lives what we can. I'm in a privileged position, so I have more choices than others, but I do feel like I can't just make work about me. It has to be about important things going on in the world, whether it be war or feminism or family relations or labor and, or the global economy or late capitalism or, I think that's what even artists who deny that their work is about anything, even artists who say they're just doing abstraction, it is about their relationship to the world. And that's what art is. I think it's trying to express what that relationship is. As a photographer who used to carry a camera around all the time, now it's my iPhone. So I post all the time on Instagram and Facebook, even though I know it's an evil company and I should quit, but it's an archive. And if I want to go find something, I can just go look because it's all organized by date. And it's just like having a darkroom in your pocket. And I do see beautiful things all the time. I walk down the street and I just see things everywhere. Reflections in windows, a beautiful piece of garbage, the light hitting a boat in the harbor. It's constant. And I'm a hyper-visual person. And I know that because I'm with people who aren't hyper-visual, like my husband is really smart, but he just doesn't notice things. He drives down the driveway and he turns the wrong way. He's just not a visual. He's not a visual person, but I am hyper, like there's a switch on in my eyes. They're just like.
So your equipment now is the iPhone.
Yeah, I do have really nice cameras. I have a Mamiya 6x7, I have a, Rolleiflex, I have a Nikon, and when I go to Japan, I bring them and I use them. And I still do work in the darkroom from negatives, and so I do still, but I don't use it for traveling, I don't even want to say tourist photography, but I'm not going to print any of these pictures from my travels, really. I did it once for a specific project, but I use my cameras for art with a capital A, so. Okay.
Well, another extremely important theme of your work is to understand the United States military and the exported violence, which is a worldwide phenomenon. So it's not just related to the United States. Interesting fact is, we all know that violence in which way ever leave trails of trauma, of suffering, of pain, of death, of course, and so on. So it's endless in its variations, what it leaves, and for sure it's not good for us. But our governments, our so-called rulers, sell weapons and within this accept violence. So why you think is this worldwide tolerated, and why is violence accepted even it's not? We are against war and we practice war at the same time. How is that possible?
Well, I think we all live in contradiction all the time. Like and I used to joke about this, if somebody can figure out how to live in the world without being a hypocrite or without living a contradiction every day, please tell me how you do that, because I think even from the smallest thing, being aware of climate change but still flying over here. Like, I shouldn't fly over here, I should take a boat. But, we do these things. Knowing Facebook is evil but staying on Facebook. Of course, nuclear weapons or war is far greater. It's a much more profound example. And I don't think everybody is against war. I think there are people, our government right now wants to bomb Iran. People do believe in war. But I think it's possible, I think it goes on because people make money. And I think it's the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about, and has just been growing and growing. And the people who make the weapons and sell the weapons make a lot of money, and they don't care about the long-term effects. I mean, they don't even care about the people working in the factories making the weapons who get sick and die. They don't care about the soldiers who die on our side. On the American, they don't care about the American soldiers. They're homeless veterans. They commit suicide at an alarmingly high rate. So I don't think, you and I are against war, and a lot of people are against war, and it would be crazy for people to say, I'm for war, but I do think many people are for war. They do believe in killing the enemy, and they demonize the other, so... why did we not bomb the train tracks into the concentration camps when we knew they were going on? And I think it's in a way because they were white Germans, they're like Western people, but we drop an atomic bomb on the Japanese because they are, I won't say the words they were called, they were put in internment camps during the war, they were vermin and the enemy and, animals and less than human. And so I really do think the fundamental thing about war is that whatever country drops the bomb, they think the other side is less than them. The United States really thinks we are number one, that we are God's gift to the universe, which makes me crazy because I'm here and I see such a better society where people don't have guns. And I see this in many places in the world. People don't have guns, there's health care, there's good public transportation, education is relatively free or cheap, there's fresh food. And in the States, it's like everybody has a gun. You go into debt to go to college. I can't take a train out of my town. There is no train. It's just crazy. Everybody has a car. Nobody has a bike. And so, I don't know. I think it's a terrible situation, and I think it's only gotten worse. And I think we have 30,000 nuclear warheads today, and they're all 10 times at least more powerful than the bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So it's a pretty scary thing. And last night at the screening, Robert Mulder, who has been photographing this whole week, he was talking about how, according to this one organization, this is the safest time in our world. And I've heard this before, people tell me this, and I don't know what they're talking about, because there's children in cages on the border between America and Mexico, how many people have died in Syria, the refugee crisis, people dying in boats trying to go to Italy, and there's just so much. So maybe it's the safest for us, like here in the Netherlands and in the United States, although I don't think it's that safe in the United States. I feel like I could be shot any day just walking down my street. But, so I don't know what it means. Like, does it have to be a world war being fought in Europe for it to be less safe? Because I think the war is happening in a lot of places, and it's because we export it. Like Palestine is disappearing, and they're being treated like rats, and we support that. Every weapon that Israel uses is funded by us. So, you know, I could go on and on, but I do think it is the question. That, and the only way, I don't think I'm going to see the end of war in my lifetime, but it will never happen unless we try to imagine it, unless we try to talk about it and try to change it. And if we just throw up our hands and do nothing, it's just going to continue and get worse. So, yeah.
Well, if we all would realize how precious life in general is, and for all of us, and that our lives will all end also. So we are just here for a moment somehow. We for sure, and I assume, would live differently, or not? What do you think?
I mean, I don't know. That's the question about human nature, right? I mean, these weapons do exist. Humans did decide to make them, right? They did come out of us. And I don't know if a lot of people are aware of how precious life is, you know. I mean, a lot of people are depressed. A lot of people commit suicide. I mean, I think it's amazing, but I've had a long, dark period too, you know. So I think it's very hard to act out of the good or to have hope a lot of the time, you know. And if you don't have hope, it's very hard to recognize the preciousness of life, or to, you know. And then, as you say, you know, we're like blips. You know, I'm here for like a teeny bit of time in terms of the history of the world. And you can feel really insignificant and be really nihilistic and abject and like not care because I'm just here, so let's just have fun and do what we want and make as much money as we can and get everything we want, you know. So it's a dilemma, and I think the world is full of all kinds of people. You know, how can we help people have hope? I mean, that's a good question. Like, how can we help people realize that life is like worth living and saving? I don't think that's that easy to do. You know, even if you just look at how, you know, I do eat meat, so I'm one of the people, but like the way animals are treated just to feed us, and most of the time it's like horrible. You know, they're not out in the field. They're raised in factory farms, and you know, so you can see it at so many levels in our society that it isn't about the good life. You know, it's about short-term, you know, profit. Or, I mean, I really do think capitalism is a horrible system, and I really think capitalism drives a lot of this. And I'm not saying, you know, that under communism there wasn't war and Stalin didn't kill a lot of people, or that but you know, if you look at most democratic socialist countries, well, I don't know, that's a whole other topic, but I do think there's more hope there. There's more possibility for more people to have enough, rather than the 1% owning all the wealth and other people just struggling to live, you know. So I think like material conditions are really important to sort of the spiritual or the humane existence, you know.
Yeah. Well, this brings me to the next question, and that is another interesting work of you, and it's called Workers Dreaming.
Mm-hmm.
Please explain your work.
Yeah.
Very short, 2 minutes.
So it's a series of large photographs, color photographs of workers with their eyes closed. So I see a worker in a certain light, like, you know, 3 women who are taking a cigarette break, and they're cooks at a casino in Louisiana, and they're under a bridge just having a cigarette break, and I ask them if they'll sit and close their eyes for me, and I take a picture of them. Or, you know, 3 firemen in front of their fire truck, or a banker in the bank that I go to. And it's just this idea of, like, most people don't necessarily see workers, or, you know, you see people being really rude to workers. Maybe not so much here, but in the States, I think, you know, if to their waitress, they're just rude, or they don't acknowledge people as people. So I wanted to acknowledge workers, and what do workers actually look like now that a lot of jobs have been exported to lower wage countries. And you know, there are people, I've done some in France and I've done some in Italy. They're not all the United States, but most of them are in the United States. So it really came out of a sense of wanting to look at labor and to sort of heroicize workers and get people to think about workers. in a different way. And I had actually walked across North Carolina, part of North Carolina, with farm workers to raise awareness of how badly they were treated, and I was working on that then. I have been a chambermaid, I have been a waitress, so I've been a lot of these jobs, and I remember being treated pretty badly. And now I'm a professor and I'm treated with respect, but you know, I wanted to try to talk about those issues. And also it's a moment where they close their eyes and they can take a break. It's very brief, but they're in the middle of their shift and they get to just stop and be seen and close their eyes. And it's kind of magical to think about, what are they thinking about? You know, are they daydreaming? Are they thinking about their cat? Are they thinking about what they're going to eat for lunch? Are they thinking, who's this crazy lady? I don't know, but they have their own thinking. You know, they have their own agency. So, and they don't look at us. So they have power, is how I look at it.
Well, you work with extreme heavy themes.
Yes.
When it's about radiation and Hiroshima and all the things around that. How do you balance this impact in your life without even struggling? I mean, you're still sitting here now at this moment, or did you struggle maybe in the past because of this heavy impact on you? For sure, these themes reflects also radiation in and for your life, right? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, well, you know, I think more people should talk about their struggles, so I'm going to be very honest, you know, and I do talk to people about this, so I'm not going to lie, but you know, I have been on antidepressants, I have been in therapy, I do see a therapist regularly. I think when I was working on the bomb drawings and I had my first child, I stopped doing them. The last one I did was the world map, where I put pins at all the places I had done drawings for, because it was just too depressing. But then I started working on Hiroshima, which is no less depressing. But I balance, I mean, I think teaching is a challenge, but it's also a positive thing. It's not focused on it's not focused on bombing in Hiroshima, it's helping students figure out how to make their work. So that's a different practice, and I think it's fulfilling in a different way. Also having children, you know, you have to function for your children. You can't just, well, you can, but you know, I've chosen not to just be depressed and in a dark place all the time because of my children, and they are very political and they're activists and they want to change the world. So I feel like I've succeeded in that. You know, I did yoga for 20 years. I go to the gym every day now. For the last year, I've started to go to the gym because Trump had me so depressed. I really thought I was gonna do something terrible. So I started going to the gym, and the gym releases endorphins and it balances things out. And once I started going to the gym, I also stopped drinking alcohol. I mean, I drink a little bit, but I used to drink a lot. So I stopped drinking alcohol, so that helps. And I think social media can be a horrible thing, but I think finding beauty and documenting it and sharing it on social media for me is like therapy. You know, I like to share with people, and I make presents, I still write letters, I have lots of pen pals, I do a lot of pleasurable things. So I think finding the pleasure and finding the beauty and meeting people and talking to people and making friends all over the world, all those things balance it out. Wow. I don't think you could make the dark, serious work unless you had the other side, because you'd be too depressed. You know, it's like yin yang, it's like a balancing thing. You have to, as Billy Bragg, my favorite musician, says, you have to take the crunchy with the smoothie. You know, you have to figure it out.
Yeah, well, in your work you fight for the good. That is extremely clear for me, which is even a common general behavior. We all want to be good, we want to work for the good. And this force for the better is undestroyable somehow. You mentioned earlier you work with this energy so much. It's for you an ongoing energy, right? So in your opinion, what do you think is life and where does it come from?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, you know, I think it's phenomenologically what it is scientifically. You know, you get pregnant and you give birth and you're on this earth for however long you're on this earth. And there's so many variations of how people live, you know. I do think, you know, you say, oh, we all want to be good. I don't know if everybody wants to be good. I don't know if everybody, I think a lot of people are selfish and just want to make money. I don't want to be pessimistic or cynical, but I don't think we all agree. I mean, this is why I think there's war, right? But I don't know. As far as I know, this is the only life we have. I mean, this is the only life I have. I don't believe in the afterlife. I don't believe in heaven. I'm not religious. So I'm just going to do what I can and what I want to do. And in my case, I'm hoping, you know, it's good things. I want to teach. I want to help other people find the good and work towards the good. It's not easy, as you know. You know, it's really not easy. But I do think art can change the world as much as anything else. I think people say it can't, but, you know, I think artists are people. You know, people like just take apart, you know, like artists aren't people, they're special, but they're just people like doctors or lawyers or bakers or bus drivers, and we all matter, you know, and everything we do matters and everything has an effect. I believe it does. So that, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I can really answer that. Who can answer that question? Maybe the Dalai Lama.
And maybe you.
And maybe me. I don't know.
Well, just recently the photographer Robert Frank died. And in a post on Instagram, on your Instagram, you said he helped you seeing the world and finding your own way of making images of it. Can you please describe a little bit your relationship you had with him?
Yeah.
And what he gave to you?
Yeah, I never met him. I wish I did. I have often told people that he's in my dreams a lot. I literally dream about him. I'm going to introduce him at a lecture, but he doesn't show up, or he's in the back of the room. I don't even meet him in my dreams, but he's in my dreams a lot. I remember getting his book when I was in high school, or seeing his book, The Americans. And when I think back on it now, he was a Swiss man, and he got a Guggenheim to drive across the United States, which is significant to me that he was an outsider doing one of the most important books about American culture. And, you know, they're classic, you know, they're the epitome of American culture. So many people know them. There's so many of them are famous, and he made films with the Rolling Stones and with Allen Ginsberg, and Jack Kerouac wrote the introduction to the book. And, you know, he's just and then he went to Nova Scotia. He sort of disappeared and went to live in Nova Scotia until he died, and kept making work and really changed his styles many times. But the idea of driving across country, he was one of the first photographers. He used a 35 millimeter camera and showed the grain. You know, they weren't about perfect prints or color or this artistic. It was really about the everyday and finding these moments that were both beautiful and disturbing. You know, a black woman holding a really white baby in the South, and it says so much about race relations and racism in our country, but it's also a beautiful photograph, you know, but it's troubling. And he was just really good at being able to do that so directly. I love his photographs. I always have. He's one of my favorites. And I do think he was a big influence on Joel Sternfeld, who was one of my teachers. So, yeah, and he died on my birthday while I was here, which is really strange to me. And yeah, I always hoped I would meet him. There's this beautiful photograph of him dancing with his wife by the photographer Elliot Irwitt. They're dancing in the kitchen, and I've always loved that photograph. And he just seemed like such a great man, and I think he was. I never met him, but I think he really was.
Yeah. Well, when you are giving a lecture, you are performing somehow, right? Can you tell me how you feel, maybe just the 5 minutes before you start? How is that?
Yeah, well, it's sort of like teaching the first day of class. I've been teaching 26 years, and every day, every year, every semester, right before the first class, I get like sick to my stomach. I mean, I don't get sick, but I feel totally nervous. But the second I start talking, it goes away. Like, because I've been doing it a long time. So even here today, you know, I was a little nervous. I wasn't that nervous, but I was a little nervous going over. You know, you don't know how many people will come. You don't know who's there. You don't know if people are going to disagree with you. You know, I've had lots of people start yelling at me in the middle of my lectures because of my politics. So, you know, it's intense sometimes. But I'm comfortable with it. I've been doing it so long. And I feel actually sort of proud and happy to share this work with people, especially when it's audiences that aren't only art. You know, I've been invited by a lot of activist groups, or I lectured at a cartography conference, and so it's a really interesting audience, and it opens up really different conversations. So I really enjoy it. I really like it. I do know it's a performance, and I've read about, you know, that, like teaching is a performance, and there's a publication, it's an online publication called Burnaway, and there was an interview with me by my really good friend Amy White, and she talks a lot about my work in Hiroshima as a performance, which I had never thought about it that way. But it's really interesting, and just how one interacts with the objects is the work. And so we all are always performing, I think.
Yeah. Well, can you tell me what the most beautiful is for you of your life today?
The most beautiful in my life today. You know, I don't know. I could tell you a million things, but I really love being home with my kids and my dog and my cat. Like my dog on my lap, the new kitten running around, my kids just wanting to be near us, you know, my husband asleep on the couch, or, you know, just that moment of being comfortable and being with people you love. And it's less and less common because my kids are getting older, we travel so much, you know, so I really love that. I love my home, I love where I live, I love how I have everything, love being in that space.
Yeah. Is there, in all your work, is there a general message?
Well, I said in my lecture today, a Hiroshima reporter asked me once to say in one sentence what it is I want to communicate. And this was about the Hiroshima work. And, you know, I'm standing there and I think, I want people to realize everything that is lost in war. And that was specifically about the Hiroshima project, but I think it's true about the bomb project. But I think I just want people to engage with the difficult subjects, because we have the power to change it if we work together. And if we don't, and we just feel hopeless, it's just going to get worse. So I feel like it's my obligation as a thinking and relatively privileged person in this world to try to do something about it. And I do. I feel really lucky, but I also feel like I work really hard. You know, I really don't stop. I do things all the time. I curate shows. I advise students. I volunteer. You know, I just do a lot of things. And so I think the general message is that what we do matters. And we should engage with the difficult subjects, and we don't have to solve it. Yeah, I can't solve war, but I can try. There's nothing wrong in trying, right?
Yeah. And what is your advice for young students, maybe for young artist students, but also for activists?
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, I think art is a form of activism, or it very well can be. I don't think all art is, but much of it is, at least for me. I think my art is a form of activism, and I think some activism is art. You know, like there was a Confederate statue on our campus at the University of North Carolina, and most of the people, they ended up pulling it down. The students pulled it down, and they were able to pull it down because they built these big banners to hide it while the police were there. And I think it was art students who built those banners to hide the statue. So that's just one example. Or, you know, like Lewis Hines' photographs of child laborers brought about child labor laws in the United States. So I think there's many examples we can look at about art making a difference. But I don't separate art. I don't really separate anything in my life, you know, teaching, art, activism. But I just was talking to a student today. She's getting her PhD in art history, but she also wants to make art. And she says she has lots of ideas, but she never does them. Like, you know, how do you just do them? She said. I was like, you just do them. You just try it. And if you don't like it, then it's research. You know, I don't really believe in failure. You know, you could try something and it doesn't work out, but then you'll do something different as a result of having tried it. I think a lot of people are just scared of trying something. So I think you just have to do the work. And I do tell my art students that most of not most, but a lot of what you do as an artist is you schlep things around. You pack up your work, you ship it, you unpack it, you buy the materials, you set everything up, you talk, you know, the amount of time that you're actually making the work, for me, isn't that much time because I do all this research and I'm traveling and I'm, you know, and so you have to want to be a hard worker, you know, you have to want to do it. And then activism is, you know, just don't work alone. I mean, you can work alone, but I think the most important thing for activism is to find people who think in similar ways and to work together, you know, to make it bigger, you know, organize events together so more people can come and reach out to other groups that you might not agree on about everything, but you agree on this one thing. So you bring 5 really different, I mean, that works so well when there's 5 really different political groups coming together about, you know, I don't know, abortion rights or something. So to just find other people, I think, and just, I don't know, anything can be art. You know, if I put this glass of water on a shelf and say it's art, you might not like it, you might think I'm crazy, but it is art because I'm an artist and I put it on the shelf as art. I mean, Marcel Duchamp proved that when he did the urinal and called it Fountain, and although he didn't really do it, a woman did it. Baroness von Elsa Friedenberg or whatever her name is. But anyway, I just try to help students feel liberated and to realize that they can make something out of nothing and no one else is going to make what they make. You know, if they don't make it, no one's going to see it. You know, if you don't do it, it's not going to happen. So do it.
Thank you very much.
You are so welcome.
Very, very much. And good luck with everything.
Thank you. It's a pleasure talking to you. Really easy to talk to you. Thank you. I hope it works out. I hope it's good.